And where we are right now, frankly, I feel good about.
Do you have any reason to feel good about it? Meaning, like, any indications that we're actually close to a deal other than the president saying 2 days?
We don't know, except for like minor leaks, what has come out of the Islamabad talks and what the consequences have been.
First of all, let's not lie to the American people. We actually know that their nuclear enrichment program is actually deep. You cannot, but exactly. So let's not lie to folk and just say that we can just bomb from on. You cannot destroy their entire nuclear enrichment program unless you put boots on the ground. That's a fact.
In today's video, Abby Phillip and Bakari Sellers schools Peter Meijer on Newsnight with Abby Phillip as a heated clash erupts over renewed US-Iran nuclear talks, rising tensions in the Middle East, and the growing doubts around Trump's negotiation strategy. Abby Phillip and Bakari Sellers press Peter Meijer on the massive gaps between US demands and Iran's position, exposing how unrealistic expectations and shifting goals are making any real deal harder to achieve while global risks continue to rise. So let's dive in and watch how Abby Phillip and Bakari Sellers shut down Peter Meijer on Newsnight with Abby Phillip.
President Trump told the New York Post that he was not pleased with reports that the U.S. had asked Iran to suspend its uranium enrichment for at least 2 decades during the last weekend's unsuccessful talks. I've been saying they can't have nuclear weapons, so I don't like the 20 years. Understandable. But Iran is at 5 years. So even getting to 20 years seems hard to do. Getting to never, ever, ever seems even harder.
And that's something that Donald Trump throughout negotiations has been very good at, is throwing something on the table and then removing it. Traditionally in a negotiation, you put it on the table. If it's on the table, great, it's up for discussion. It's kind of a sacrosanct thing. That is not his approach. Where we are right now, and I think this is where you see the naval blockade that the U.S. has started to enforce against Iranian ships that have left port in Iran or that are going to ports in Iran, forcing them to turn back, forcing them to not continue on their journey, denying the Iranians that oil revenue. That is ratcheting up the pressure against the regime to an inordinate amount. And where we are right now, frankly, I feel good about.
Do you have any reason to feel good about it? Meaning, like, any indications that we're actually close to a deal other than the president saying 2 days?
We don't know, except for like minor leaks, what has come out of the Islamabad talks and what the consequences have been when the Iranian delegation returned to Tehran and their conversations, right? We're relying on leaks there. But the reality is that the screws are being tightened to an inordinate degree against that regime at the moment. If I were in their shoes and looking around at all my options, you don't have any. So the question between 5 years and 20 years and never years, going between all of that, that is where ultimately at the end of the day, they need to figure out what is in their best interest.
I thought that regime was deposed, for one. And two, I think
the Ayatollah Khamenei's dead. Most of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard leadership are dead.
The fact is that we're still arguing for the same things that the JCPOA did.
No.
I mean, and
ballistic missiles and proxies.
Actually, if you want to go back to it, we actually had a deal in place where there was no nuclear enrichment within 20 years. We had this conversation last night, correct, exactly, which we don't have right now. And then we also had inspectors going in, being able to check, trust, and verify what they were doing. We don't have that right now.
Which also would have ended a year
But we
and a half
also have something that most people don't want, which is that in order to get to where you're talking about, which is actually destroying their entire nuclear program, we have to put boots on the ground. And nobody wants to say,
I don't think that's true.
First of all, let's not lie to the American people. We actually know that their nuclear enrichment program is actually deep. Exactly. Yes. So let's not lie to folk and just say that we can just bomb from on. You cannot destroy their entire nuclear enrichment program unless you put boots on the ground. That's a fact. That's not something we're making up. That's not something we're just talking about.
What stands out here is how unrealistic some of these expectations sound when you compare them to how nuclear diplomacy has actually worked in the past. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action wasn't perfect, but it created strict limits, real inspections and transparency that at least slowed Iran's program. Right now, there's no comparable framework in place, and expecting Iran to suddenly accept harsher terms like zero enrichment indefinitely without offering incentives or trust-building measures just doesn't line up with how negotiations typically succeed in complex geopolitical conflicts. There's also a major gap between military rhetoric and operational reality. Defense experts have repeatedly said that Iran's nuclear facilities are buried deep underground and spread across multiple locations. Airstrikes alone can damage parts of the program, but they can't fully eliminate it. That's why analysts often point out that completely dismantling it would likely require ground operations, which comes with massive risks, casualties, long-term occupation, and the kind of escalation the US has tried to avoid since the Iraq War. On top of that, economic pressure like blockades can cut revenue, but they also tend to harden positions rather than bring quick compromise. Sanctions and pressure campaigns have historically taken years to produce results, not days or weeks. Meanwhile, global markets react instantly, especially with tensions near the Strait of Hormuz, where even small disruptions can spike oil prices worldwide. Without a consistent strategy that blends diplomacy and realism, it starts to feel less like a plan and more like a gamble with high stakes.
Iranians, if in the context of a diplomatic negotiation, say, you know what, that highly enriched uranium we're sitting on, it is no longer beneficial for us to do that.
Bakari, we have boots on the water right now. I mean, let's
There's
not.
a ship in between.
Well, yes, I know there's a ship in between, but that ship can easily be targeted by Iranians, and they would be toast. So we have American lives. You're telling me that
We've
you don't
also
think
lost American lives.
we've lost American lives, and we have American lives at risk there right now. So let's not pretend we don't.
I'm not going to dispute that. You're absolutely right, and there are realistically going to be boots on the ground. We have boots on the boat. That's a
Why is
funny
that
expression.
realistically though? Like
why is it realistic? I'm agreeing with you.
I mean, I hear you.
Because
but like,
I've heard a lot of reasons why people are really against what Trump has done, but I'm also not really hearing a rational response why we should let Iran just be. To pretend that this war was completely unnecessary and pretending that Iran is not a threat and pretending it's normal that they swear in their president and Ayatollah screaming death to America and pretending that enrichment is not a problem, whether it's short term or long term, when a regime literally hates Western values, when a regime attacks our allies, I also think it's being ignorant. Now, I don't want to copy what Europe is doing, where they want to mortgage their future for 10 years of comfortability at the expense of a long-term problem. So I appreciate the fact that maybe it's short-term pain for a longer-term solution. Is it ideal?
No. What's the pain? Because I heard the talking points and they're great. And I actually agree with some of you because some of what you said. Because listen, I don't want a nuclear-enriched Iran. I don't think Iran deserves to have a nuclear weapon. I think they sponsored terror for 40 years. I think they want to destroy America. I think they want to destroy Israel. I agree with all of those points. But I'm not the short-term pain thing. You just can't leap over that. So define that for me as we go forward, because
short-term pain, we're paying more for everything. I'm not going to sit here and deny that gas is not going to go up and groceries are unaffordable. I'm not going to be ignorant. But I also feel like if we don't do it now, I'm 24, it's going to bite me in the ass down the road at some point. I don't trust in Iran. I don't like that they're sponsoring terrorism. It's death to Israel, but it's death to America right after that.
But respectfully, when you were 16, we had a deal in place.
But do you think
it was
when
not
you were like I hear you're 24 now, when you were 16, we had a deal in place, and that deal is something that actually prevented them more so then from having a nuclear weapon than where we are today.
And what I will add to is
let me let Sarah have a word.
I will add that it took 20 months to negotiate the JCPOA.
That's a fact.
And then we also look at the Iraq-Iran war that lasted 8 years. I think the Iranian regime feels like they actually have the upper hand because it's in Trump's best interest to wrap this up, because he knows that the American people are not on board with this war. They're not on board with the short-term pain, if that's what you're saying, because I feel like there is no end in sight right now. It's wishful thinking for him to think that he's going to be able to wrap this up, and that's on his timeline. But for the Iranians, I think that they actually know that they have Trump backed into a corner right now because
totally disagree.
Well,
I think they have one
more. I also think it's wishful thinking to think that there's not going to be a regime there that is going to be anti-Western and be screaming
But
death
at
to
least
America.
have them be afraid
Yeah,
of
well,
America.
they're not afraid. They're,
But they,
are,
I promise
they are fundamentalists.
They don't like where they are
No, but listen,
right
they've,
now.
you know, what people don't understand is what these fundamentalists over there who have not been deposed, who have not changed. It's like with gray hairs. You're 24, you don't have any. You pluck one out, 3 more come out.
A key thing to notice here is how often people underestimate how complex nuclear deterrence actually is. History shows that military force alone rarely eliminates a nuclear program completely. Even heavily bombed programs like in Iraq in the 1980s were rebuilt over time. That's why most experts point to agreements like the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action as more effective tools because they combined inspections, limits, and international oversight rather than relying purely on force. Without that kind of structure, you're essentially hoping pressure works instantly, which historically it doesn't. There's also a big misconception about what short-term pain actually means. It's not just higher gas prices for a few weeks. When conflicts hit energy routes or production, it creates long-term volatility in global markets. The Strait of Hormuz alone carries a huge portion of the world's oil, and any disruption there affects everything from transportation to food supply chains. So when people talk about temporary sacrifice, it's important to recognize that these economic effects can last months or even years, especially if the conflict drags on. And then there's the bigger strategic reality. Ideology doesn't disappear through force. You can remove leaders or damage infrastructure, but belief systems and political structures tend to adapt and survive. That's exactly what happened after the Iraq War, where removing a regime didn't bring stability, but instead created new factions and prolonged conflict. Without a long-term diplomatic strategy alongside any military pressure, it risks repeating that same cycle where the problem evolves instead of actually being resolved.
I just learned
I
that.
agree. You can kill the person. You can't kill the ideology.
There has been no regime
Sarah's,
change.
to
Donald
Sarah's
Trump has got a
point, getting
plan.
a long-term deal, a permanent deal with Iran on their nuclear capabilities, on their ballistic missiles, on their funding of terror proxies is probably not going to happen in 6 days.
No,
I mean, is that
it's gonna be-
realistic?
I think it's going to be initially there can be signals of what is on the table and what remains to be negotiated. And on the Iranian side of the house, committing to having free and open trade through the Strait of Hormuz. Now, on the U.S. side of the house, we still have sanctions that we're enforcing against the Iranians. So that's a point of
So in
contention.
other words, not a grand bargain, not the deal.
You're not
that
going to
they
get a grand
say.
bargain in a week.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm telling you, this is what J.D. Vance says that that Trump wants a grand bargain. I don't think that they're being transparent with the American
not only
people about when that could feasibly happen, if it can happen at
But
all.
not only transparency, I mean, it's just like, if we're going to do this, why can't you calculate just what happens in the Strait of Hormuz? Why can't you calculate or understand what insurance companies are going to do in response to that? Like, we have been caught off guard every single step of the way. You're shaking your head, no.
I'm shaking my head. No.
Why? Tell me, explain to me, because
If there's
because
any industry that you
because
think
now we're
Donald
paying-
Trump
now-
would not have a very comprehensive and competent understanding of within his administration. I mean, what was the whole, Donald Trump is a sucker for the oil industry. Oh my God, he's got so many oil executives in there.
But
You know,
oil-
I
but
guess
oil-
I should draw-
I guess I should
first of all,
note-
the Strait of
I should
Hormuz,
note, Peter, that
Hormuz.
Trump did say that he didn't expect them to
Correct.
close the Strait.
Not
of
only
because it
Hormuz.
was
that-
cutting off their nose to spite their
He also,
face.
But also-
also
I'm
just
expected
saying,
the
I'm just
Iranian
telling you
people
what
to
he
rise
said.
up and depose.
He did say
the
that.
Exactly, but the Strait of
which did
Hormuz,
not happen.
it delivers
As
25% of the
did Israel.
world's oil.
Respect that.
And right now, oil prices in the United States of America, are up 50%. Like, we're not actually out here saying that Donald Trump is some magical genius. What we're saying is that he failed. Like, they failed.
I want to go back to what we were speaking about earlier because I wanted to ask you, well, what's your alternative? And both of you seem that a deal is tangible. And I really want to ask you,
Oh, I got my
do you
alternative.
think there's good faith negotiations with the Islamic Republic of Iran?
Absolutely not. I have a deal. I know what we're going to do.
Let's hear it.
The
Foreign
JCPOA.
policy.
We did it already. Can we go to commercial? Like there's no, like they were further away.
Killing our American soldiers throughout the region. Didn't stop them from building ballistic missiles.
Yeah, I feel like that's a symptom
our
of the bigger
European
problem.
NATO ally.
We have more problems.
We have no allies left. Did you see the Italian prime minister today?
We have NATO treaty allies.
Did you see the Italian prime minister basically tell you that you're full
I
of
would love to
BS?
talk about NATO.
Prime Minister Meloni.
One second. And not only that, but you actually asked our allies to help you in the Strait of Hormuz, and you know what they told you?
Ask
Fly
them,
a kite.
ask them to
Exactly,
look out
because
for their
they would
own
rather be comfortable
self-interest.
for 10 more years than
Nobody
actually
wants
bet
to
on
be
their
comfortable
future.
with Iran. What people want is competency and
They have
consistency.
suicidal empathy.
One thing that really becomes clear here is how unrealistic it is to expect a quick, clean resolution to something this complex. Nuclear negotiations aren't something you wrap up in days. They take years of back and forth, trust building, and verification. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action alone took nearly 2 years to finalize, and even that was considered one of the fastest major nuclear agreements in modern history. So expecting a grand bargain in a week or two just doesn't match how diplomacy actually works at that level, especially between long-standing geopolitical rivals with deep mistrust and conflicting strategic interests on both sides. There's also the economic side that keeps getting underestimated. Around 20-25% of the world's oil supply flows through the Strait of Hormuz, which means even small disruptions can spike global prices almost instantly. And it's not just fuel. Insurance costs for shipping go up, supply chains tighten, and those costs get passed down to consumers. We've seen this before during past tensions in the Gulf, where even the threat of escalation caused markets to react sharply before anything major even happened. And then there's the bigger strategic issue. You can't bomb your way into stability. Removing individuals or damaging infrastructure doesn't erase ideology or long-standing political systems. That lesson was painfully clear after the Iraq War, where the aftermath created more instability rather than less. Without a consistent diplomatic strategy and realistic expectations, it starts to look less like a plan and more like reacting in real time to a situation that keeps getting more complicated and harder to contain globally, especially under rising tensions. Pause. Are you getting tired of getting half the story from biased news sources? One outlet says one thing and another says the complete opposite. How are you supposed to know what's actually true? That's where ground news comes in. It lets you compare how different media outlets, left, right, and center, are covering the same story. So you can see the full picture instead of just the echo chamber. And here's the best part. Click the link in the description and get 40% off the Vantage tier, which gives you even deeper insights into media bias and political trends. Stay informed, think for yourself, and check out Ground News in the description down below.